My name is Delphine Montgomery. I'm 29 years old, and I run a tech consulting firm that grosses 8 figures annually. But to my family in Millbrook Heights, I'm still the awkward kid who couldn't afford designer clothes in high school. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The dinner happened on a Tuesday evening in October. The kind of crisp autumn night where the air smells like wood smoke and possibility. I'd driven my Tesla Model S through the winding roads of Westshire County to reach my childhood home, a modest colonial that my parents, Theodore and Beatrice Hartwell, had owned for 37 years. I should have known something was brewing when I walked through the front door. The dining room table was set with their good china, the Waterford crystal that only came out for special occasions or when they wanted to impress someone. My younger brother Jasper was already seated, fidgeting with his napkin, while my sister Cordelia scrolled through her phone with practiced disinterest. "Delphine, honey, you made it," Mom said, her voice carrying that peculiar blend of warmth and calculation I'd grown to recognize over the years. She was wearing her best pearls, the ones Dad had bought her for their 20th anniversary. A warning sign I chose to ignore. Dad emerged from the kitchen carrying a bottle of wine, the expensive Bordeaux I'd sent them last Christmas, still unopened until tonight. He smiled that politician's smile he reserved for moments when he needed something. "There's our little entrepreneur," he said, pulling out my chair with theatrical flourish. "How's business treating you these days?" I should have left then. Should have recognized the setup, the careful staging, the way they all seemed to be holding their breath. Instead, I settled into my seat and accepted the wine, thinking maybe this time would be different. Maybe this time, we could just be a normal family sharing a normal dinner. The conversation started innocuously enough. Jasper talked about his new job at the advertising agency in downtown Meridian City. Cordelia complained about her landlord raising the rent on her studio apartment in the Arts District. Mom updated me on neighborhood gossip, and Dad discussed his plans to finally retire from his position as deputy manager at Riverside Insurance. It wasn't until the main course arrived, Mom's famous pot roast with those little potatoes I used to love as a child, that the real agenda revealed itself. "Actually, Delphine," Dad said, cutting his meat with deliberate precision, "we asked you here tonight because we need to discuss something important." The fork paused halfway to my mouth. Across the table, Jasper wouldn't meet my eyes, and Cordelia had suddenly found her phone fascinating again. Only Mom continued eating, her movements mechanical, practiced. "What kind of discussion?" I asked, though my stomach was already sinking. Dad set down his knife and fork, folding his hands in that serious way he used to when I was in trouble as a teenager. "Well, honey, your mother and I have been talking, and we think it's time for some changes around here." He gestured vaguely around the dining room, taking in the faded wallpaper and the furniture that had seen better decades. "This house is getting old, and frankly, so are we. We're thinking of downsizing, moving somewhere smaller. Maybe one of those nice retirement communities out in Elmhaven." I nodded slowly, not seeing the trap yet. "That sounds reasonable. You could probably get a good price for this place, especially with the market the way it is." "Well, that's just it," Mom chimed in, finally looking up from her plate. "We've been looking at the numbers, and even with the sale of the house, we're going to need some help with the transition. The retirement communities we're interested in require a substantial deposit." The pieces were starting to click into place, but I waited for them to say it outright. I'd learned over the years not to volunteer for anything where my family was concerned. Jasper cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The thing is, Del, they've been looking at this place called Golden Meadows. It's really nice, has a golf course and everything. But the entrance fee is pretty steep." "How steep?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect I already knew where this was heading. Dad leaned back in his chair, assuming the casual pose of a man about to make a reasonable request. "About 300,000. Plus the monthly fees, of course." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Outside, I could hear the October wind rattling the windows of my childhood home. Inside, the only sound was the tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, counting down the seconds until someone spoke. And you want me to help with this, I said. It wasn't a question. Well, Dad said, spreading his hands in a gesture that was supposed to convey reluctant necessity, you're doing so well with your business. And we did support you through college, helped you get started in life. It would be appropriate for you to help us in our golden years. That's when he said it. The words that would change everything between us forever. Besides, it's not like you have a family of your own to worry about. No husband, no kids. To be honest, Delphine, you've always been something of a financial burden to this family. Now you have a chance to give back. The words hit me like ice water. Financial burden. Me. The daughter who had paid for Jasper's car when he crashed his first one. The sister who had quietly covered Cordelia's credit card debt twice. The child who had been sending them money every month for the past 5 years without them ever asking how I was doing, how my business was growing, or whether I might need support myself. I smiled. Actually smiled. And in that moment, I made a decision that would teach them exactly what a real financial burden looked like. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The silence that followed Dad's words stretched like a rubber band about to snap. I set down my wine glass with deliberate care, watching the burgundy liquid catch the light from Mom's chandelier. The same chandelier I'd helped them buy 3 years ago when theirs broke during a storm. A financial burden, I repeated slowly, tasting each word. That's interesting, Theodore. I never called him Theodore. It was always Dad, or Daddy when I was younger. But something had shifted in that moment, something fundamental and irreversible. He noticed the change immediately, his eyebrows drew together in confusion. Now, honey, I didn't mean. No, please, I interrupted, my voice eerily calm. I want to make sure I understand this correctly. I'm a financial burden. The daughter who paid for Jasper's totaled Honda Civic when he was 22. I turned to look at my brother, who had gone pale. What was that, about 18,000? Jasper opened his mouth, then closed it again. And Cordelia, I continued, swiveling to face my sister, when your gallery job fell through and you couldn't make rent for 3 months, who covered that? What was it, about 4,000 total? Cordelia's phone had disappeared into her lap. She was staring at her plate like it might provide an escape route. Delphine, Mom said carefully, we appreciate everything you've done, but I'm a financial burden, I finished. Got it. And the monthly checks I've been sending for 5 years? The $1,500 that magically appears in your account every month? What would you call that? The color drained from Dad's face. How did I know you never told Jasper and Cordelia about those? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Because I know you, Theodore. I know exactly who you are. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, opening my banking app with practiced ease. You want to talk about financial burdens? Let's talk numbers. My fingers moved across the screen while my family watched in horrified fascination. The monthly transfers, the emergency payments, the loans that were never repaid, it was all there, documented in digital black and white. Let's see, I murmured, scrolling through 5 years of transaction history. Monthly support payments to Theodore and Beatrice Hartwell, $90,000. Car payment for Jasper Montgomery Hartwell, $18,500. Credit card debt for Cordelia, $4,200. Emergency roof repair, 2022, $12,000. Mom's medical bills when insurance wouldn't cover her knee surgery, $8,000. Various birthday gifts, Christmas presents, and small loans that were never repaid. I looked up from my phone, meeting each of their eyes in turn. Grand total, approximately $247,000 over the past 5 years. The grandfather clock in the hallway seemed louder now, each tick echoing in the stunned silence. That's nearly $50,000 a year, I continued conversationally. $50,000 from your financially burdensome daughter. Interesting math, don't you think? Dad's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. Delphine, we never asked for. You're right, I said, standing up from the table. You never asked. You just expected. There's a difference. I walked to the window overlooking their backyard, the same yard where I'd played as a child, where I'd dreamed of making my parents proud someday. The irony wasn't lost on me. You want to know what a real financial burden looks like? I asked, turning back to face them. Let me show you. I returned to my seat and opened a different app on my phone, my business banking account. The one connected to Montgomery Tech Solutions, the company I'd built from nothing in my tiny apartment in Riverdale 6 years ago. This is my primary business account, I said, turning the screen so they could see the balance. The one where client payments are deposited. Mom gasped. Jasper knocked over his water glass. Cordelia's phone clattered to the floor. The balance showed $2,847,329.84. 2.8 million, I said quietly. That's what my financially burdensome existence has managed to accumulate. Funny thing is, I always thought family was supposed to celebrate each other's successes. But apparently, I was wrong about that too. Dad's voice came out as a croak. I had no idea you were doing so well. Of course you didn't, I replied. Because you never asked. Not once in 5 years did you ask how business was going, whether I was happy, whether I might need support. You just saw me as an ATM with legs. I stood up again, smoothing down my black dress, the Tom Ford one that cost more than they'd probably guess. But you know what? You're absolutely right, Theodore. I have been a financial burden. On myself. I picked up my purse and car keys, every movement deliberate and calm. Thank you for dinner. It's been illuminating. Wait, Mom called out as I headed for the door. Where are you going? We need to finish this conversation. I paused in the doorway, looking back at the 3 people who shared my DNA but had never truly known me. Actually, we don't. But don't worry, I'm going to fix this financial burden problem once and for all. As I walked to my car, I could hear them talking in urgent, panicked whispers through the open window. By the time I reached the Tesla, my phone was already buzzing with text messages. I didn't read them. Instead, I sat in my car for a moment, engine running, looking back at the house where I'd grown up believing that love was something you had to earn with good grades and good behavior and, eventually, good money. Tomorrow, they would learn exactly what it felt like when their financial burden decided to become someone else's problem. And for the first time in 5 years, I was actually looking forward to a family conversation. I drove through the winding streets of Westshire County with my hands steady on the wheel, though my heart was racing like a Formula One engine. The conversation replayed in my mind on an endless loop, Dad's casual dismissal, the way they'd all just sat there nodding along when he called me a financial burden. The entitlement in his voice when he'd asked for $300,000 like he was requesting the salt. By the time I reached my penthouse apartment in downtown Meridian City, I had made my decision. Not the emotional, reactive choice they probably expected, but something far more surgical. Something that would teach them the true meaning of financial burden. I poured myself a glass of the Macallan 25 I kept for special occasions and settled into my home office. The floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city lights, but tonight I barely noticed them. I was focused entirely on the computer screen in front of me. First, I pulled up my personal banking dashboard. 5 accounts, each serving a different purpose. The checking account I used for daily expenses showed a balance of $47,892. My emergency fund sat at $180,000. The investment account had grown to just over $400,000. My business reserves held another $320,000. And then there was the big one, the primary business account they'd seen tonight, now showing $2,847,329.84 after today's client payment from Nexus Corporation. I opened a new browser tab and navigated to my brokerage account. Another $1.3 million in carefully diversified investments. Stock options from 3 different companies I'd consulted for. Cryptocurrency holdings that had performed better than I'd ever imagined. the total picture was staggering, even to me. Somewhere north of $4.5 million, accumulated through 6 years of 18-hour days, strategic investments, and a business model that had scaled beyond my wildest dreams. All of it earned while my family saw me as their personal safety net. I opened my laptop and began typing. Not an angry email, anger would give them something to dismiss, to explain away. Instead, I crafted something much more effective. Dear Theodore, Beatrice, Jasper, and Cordelia, I began. After tonight's dinner conversation, I've had time to reflect on your concerns about my being a financial burden to the family. You're absolutely right, and I want to take immediate action to correct this situation. I paused, savoring the irony of what I was about to do. Effective immediately, I'm implementing a comprehensive solution to ensure I never burden any of you financially again. To that end, I've taken the following actions. I opened my banking app and began making transfers. The first one was symbolic, exactly $2.1 million transferred to Dad's checking account, the one I'd been quietly sending money to for 5 years. The transaction would take until morning to clear, but the electronic receipt confirmed it was already in motion. As I waited for the confirmation, I continued typing. Step 1. I've transferred $2.1 million to Theodore Hartwell's account ending in 4792. This should more than cover the Golden Meadows entrance fee you mentioned, plus provide a comfortable cushion for any future needs. My fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, momentum building with each word. Step 2. I've canceled the automatic monthly transfer of $1,500 that has been going to your household account for the past 5 years. As a financial burden, I felt it was inappropriate for me to continue this arrangement. The irony was delicious. They had no idea about those monthly payments, which meant they'd been living off money they didn't even know existed. Tomorrow morning, they'd wake up to find themselves millionaires, but they'd also discover their safety net had vanished. Step 3. I've updated my emergency contact information with all financial institutions, removing family members and replacing them with my attorney, Harrison Blackwell of Meridian Legal Associates. I included Harrison's contact information, knowing he'd be both amused and professionally equipped to handle whatever chaos was about to unfold. Step 4. I've established a trust fund that will handle any future family financial requests. All such requests should be submitted in writing to the trust administrator, along with detailed justification and proposed repayment terms. That was creative license. There was no trust fund yet, but there would be by tomorrow afternoon. I made a mental note to call my financial advisor first thing in the morning. I want to thank you all for helping me recognize this problem tonight. Your honesty about my burdensome nature has inspired me to make changes that will benefit everyone involved. I attached screenshots of the transfer confirmation, then added one final paragraph. P.S. Theodore, you mentioned that I have no family of my own to worry about. You're right about that too. As of tonight, I'm focusing entirely on building the family I choose, rather than the one I inherited. I hope you enjoy your golden years at Golden Meadows. The deposit should clear by 9 a.m. tomorrow. I hit send at exactly 11:47 p.m. Then I poured another glass of whiskey and began making a list. First thing tomorrow, call Harrison about setting up that trust fund. Second, meet with my financial advisor about restructuring my assets. Third, start looking at real estate in other cities, maybe somewhere with better weather and fewer complicated family dynamics. My phone buzzed almost immediately. A text from Cordelia. Del, what did you mean about fixing the financial burden problem? Dad's freaking out. I turned off my phone without responding. Outside my windows, Meridian City sparkled like a constellation fallen to earth. I'd built my success in this city, created something meaningful and valuable. But tonight had shown me something important. You can't build genuine relationships on a foundation of financial obligation. For the first time in 5 years, I felt truly free. They'd called me a burden, and I'd taken them at their word. Tomorrow, they'd learn exactly what life looked like when their burden decided to become someone else's blessing instead. I raised my glass to the city lights and smiled. Phase 1 was complete. My phone started buzzing at 6:23 a.m. I know the exact time because I was already awake, sitting on my balcony with coffee and watching the sunrise paint Meridian City in shades of gold and amber. I'd slept better than I had in months, despite everything, or maybe because of it. The first call was from Mom. I let it go to voicemail. The second was from Dad, 3 minutes later. Voicemail. Then Jasper. Voicemail. Cordelia texted, "Call me now." What did you do? I sipped my coffee and watched a hawk circle the financial district below. The bird was hunting, patient and precise. I understood the feeling. By 7 a.m., I had 14 missed calls. I finally decided to listen to the voicemails, if only for entertainment value. Mom's voice was shaky. "Delphine, honey, we need to talk. There's been some kind of mistake with the bank. Please call us back immediately." Dad's first message was confusion. "Delphine, I'm looking at my bank account and there's money here that doesn't make sense. We need to discuss this." His second message, recorded 20 minutes later, was pure panic. "What the hell did you do? The bank is saying this transfer is legitimate, but this has to be some kind of error. Call me back right now." Jasper's message was the most honest. "Del, Mom and Dad are losing their minds. Dad's at the bank demanding they reverse some huge transfer. Can you please just call and explain what's happening?" I deleted all the voicemails and opened my laptop. Time for the morning routine, checking client emails, reviewing project timelines, and watching my carefully planned disruption unfold in real time. My email inbox had 17 new messages from family members. I scrolled through the subject lines. Urgent, call immediately, what have you done? We need to talk, and my personal favorite from Cordelia, are you having a breakdown? I opened the one from Dad first. It was a masterpiece of confused outrage. "Delphine, I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing, but this isn't funny. There's over $2 million in my account that doesn't belong there. The bank is saying you authorized this transfer, but that's impossible. You don't have that kind of money. This has to be some kind of fraud or identity theft. I'm calling the police if you don't fix this immediately." I actually laughed out loud. Even with documented proof that I'd sent them millions, Dad's first instinct was to assume it was impossible. That I couldn't possibly have earned that much money on my own. Mom's email was more manipulative. "Sweetheart, I know you're upset about last night, and maybe Daddy didn't express himself the right way, but this is getting out of hand. Whatever point you're trying to make, you've made it. Now please fix this mistake so we can sit down and talk like adults." Jasper had sent 3 emails in rapid succession, each one more desperate than the last. The final one read, "Del, please. Dad's talking about calling a lawyer. He thinks someone hacked your accounts. Just call us back and explain what's happening. Please." But it was Cordelia's email that really captured the family's collective bewilderment. "I can't believe you actually did it. When you said you were going to fix the financial burden problem, I thought you meant you were going to cut us off or something petty like that. I never imagined you'd actually give them millions of dollars. What is wrong with you? Do you have any idea what kind of taxes they'll have to pay on this? Did you even think this through? Leave it to Cordelia to worry about the tax implications of a gift that had just made our parents millionaires overnight." I started drafting my response, but before I could finish, my building's concierge called. "Ms. Montgomery, I have a Theodore Hartwell here demanding to see you. He says he's your father and it's an emergency. Should I send him up?" I checked the time. 8:15 a.m. He'd probably been at the bank since they opened, trying to undo what couldn't be undone. "Tell him I'm not available, Marcus. If he'd like to schedule an appointment, he can contact my office during business hours." "Of course, miss." He seems quite agitated, though. I'm sure he is. If he becomes disruptive, please don't hesitate to call security. Through my floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see Dad's silver Buick in the circular drive below, parked at an angry angle that took up 2 spaces. He was pacing beside it, phone pressed to his ear, gesticulating wildly at the building. My own phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize, probably Dad calling from the lobby. I let it ring. 10 minutes later, Marcus called back. He's left the building, Miss Montgomery, but he says he'll be back. He also asked me to give you a message. This isn't over. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the casual cruelty in his voice last night, the way he dismissed my entire existence as burdensome, and the sympathy evaporated. My laptop chimed with a new email notification. This one was from someone I hadn't expected, my Aunt Penelope, Dad's sister, who lived in California and barely kept in touch with the family. Delphine, your father just called me in hysterics saying you've lost your mind and given them millions of dollars they can't return. He wants me to stage some kind of intervention. I told him I'd talk to you first. What the hell is going on over there? I smiled and began typing my response to Aunt Penelope. Hi Aunt Pen. Dad's right about the money. I transferred $2.1 million to his account last night after he informed me at dinner that I was a financial burden to the family. He's also right that they can't return it. I structured the transfer as an irrevocable gift. What he's wrong about is me losing my mind. I've never been more clear about anything in my life. I attached a screenshot of my business account balance, then continued. If you're wondering where this money came from, I built a tech consulting company that's been quite successful. If you're wondering why I gave it to them, ask Dad about the dinner conversation where he requested $300,000 for his retirement home while simultaneously calling me a burden. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to make it someone else's responsibility. Before sending, I added one final line, P.S. You might want to ask him about the $1,500 I've been sending them every month for 5 years. They never mentioned that part, did they? I hit send and poured another cup of coffee. Outside, the city was coming alive with morning traffic and the promise of a beautiful autumn day. By 9 a.m., I had 32 missed calls and an inbox full of increasingly frantic emails. But I was done responding to their panic. They'd wanted me to stop being a financial burden, and I'd given them exactly what they asked for. Now they could figure out what to do with their windfall. All by themselves. The irony was perfect. In trying to eliminate their burden, I'd just become their biggest problem. At 2:30 p.m., I was in the middle of a client call with Nexus Corporation when my assistant, Amelia, knocked on my office door. She looked flustered, unusual for someone who typically handled crisis management for Fortune 500 companies without breaking a sweat. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but there are 3 people in the lobby claiming to be your family. Security called up because they're causing a scene. I muted my call and looked out my office window toward the street 20 floors below. Sure enough, Dad's silver Buick was parked in the visitor section of Montgomery Tech Solutions parking garage. Tell security I'll be down in 10 minutes, I said. And Amelia? Call Harrison Blackwell's office and ask him to join us. Tell him it's the family situation we discussed this morning. I unmuted my call and wrapped up the conversation with Nexus, apologizing for the delay. Then I straightened my blazer, checked my reflection in the glass partition, and headed downstairs to face the music. The Montgomery Tech Solutions lobby was designed to impress: 30-foot ceilings, marble floors, and a water feature that cost more than most people's cars. I'd specifically chosen the most intimidating space possible for client meetings, but today it would serve a different purpose. Dad, Mom, and Jasper were clustered near the reception desk, looking wildly out of place among the modern furniture and abstract art. Dad was still wearing the same clothes from last night's dinner, now wrinkled and coffee-stained. Mom clutched her purse like a life preserver. Jasper kept checking his phone, probably hoping for an escape route. The receptionist, Claire, caught my eye and mouthed, "Security," with raised eyebrows. I shook my head slightly and walked toward my family with the same measured pace I use for difficult client negotiations. Theodore. Beatrice. Jasper. I nodded to each of them in turn. This is unexpected. Dad stepped forward, his face red with either anger or embarrassment. Don't you, Theodore, me, young lady. We need to talk. Now. Actually, I said, glancing at my Apple Watch, I have another client call in 20 minutes. But I can spare 15 if you'd like to use one of our conference rooms. Stop talking to us like we're strangers, Mom interjected, her voice cracking. We're your family. Are we? I asked genuinely. Because last night you made it quite clear that I was nothing but a financial burden. Today you're standing in my office lobby, demanding my time. I'm not sure I understand the distinction. The elevator chimed, and Harrison Blackwell emerged, looking every inch the high-powered attorney in his charcoal suit and Italian leather briefcase. At 45, Harrison had the kind of presence that made opposing counsel nervous and judges listen carefully. Today, he looked amused. Ms. Montgomery, he said formally, extending his hand. I believe you wanted me present for this meeting? Dad's eyes widened. A lawyer? You brought a lawyer to talk to your own family? I brought my attorney to witness a conversation with 3 people who are threatening legal action over a legitimate gift, I corrected. Harrison, meet Theodore, Beatrice, and Jasper Hartwell. The beneficiaries of last night's transfer. Harrison smiled that predatory smile that had won him landmark cases. Ah yes, the $2.1 million gift. Congratulations on your good fortune. It's not a gift. Dad exploded, loud enough that several employees looked over from the coffee station. She doesn't have that kind of money. This has to be fraud or embezzlement or something. Actually, Harrison said, pulling a tablet from his briefcase, I've reviewed the transaction documentation this morning. The transfer was made from Ms. Montgomery's verified business account using her authorized banking credentials. The IRS gift tax documentation has already been filed. It's completely legitimate. He showed them the screen, though they were too flustered to actually read anything. Ms. Montgomery has been quite successful in her consulting practice. This transfer represents approximately 47% of her liquid assets. Mom gasped. 47%? Delphine, that's millions more than what you gave us. Correct, I said calmly. Would you like to see the portfolio breakdown? Harrison has the complete financial disclosure if you're interested. No. Dad shouted, then lowered his voice when several more people looked over. We don't want your money. We want you to take it back. I'm afraid that's impossible, Harrison interjected smoothly. The transfer was structured as an irrevocable gift. Ms. Montgomery cannot legally reclaim those funds, nor would the bank allow such a reversal. Jasper, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Del, why are you doing this? This isn't like you. I turned to my brother, studying his face. He looked genuinely confused, not angry like Dad or manipulative like Mom. Just lost. Isn't it, though? I asked. When have any of you ever asked what I wanted? When have you considered that maybe, just maybe, I might have my own dreams, my own struggles, my own needs? That's not fair, Mom said. We've always supported you. You've supported the version of me that writes checks, I corrected. The daughter who solves problems by throwing money at them. But the woman who built this company from nothing? The person who works 18-hour days and hasn't taken a real vacation in 3 years? You don't even know she exists. Harrison checked his watch. Ms. Montgomery, you mentioned another appointment. Right. I looked at my family, really looked at them. Dad's confusion was shifting to something uglier, wounded pride mixed with calculation. Mom was already working on her next angle of manipulation. But Jasper just looked sad. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice carrying the authority I developed in 6 years of high-stakes negotiations. You're going to leave my office building. You're going to go home and decide what kind of relationship, if any, you want to have with me going forward. And you're going to do it without demanding anything else from me. You can't just, Dad started. Yes, I can, I interrupted. Because I'm not your financial burden anymore, remember? I'm not your emergency fund, your safety net, or your personal ATM. I'm a successful businesswoman who just made you millionaires overnight. I gestured toward the lobby's glass doors. The money is yours now. Figure out what to do with it. But figure it out somewhere else. Harrison stepped forward slightly, his presence making it clear that this conversation was over. "Mr. and Mrs. Hartwell, you might want to consult with a tax attorney about the gift tax implications. I can recommend several excellent firms if you'd like." As they walked toward the exit, Dad turned back one last time. "This isn't over, Delphine." "Actually," I called after him, "it is. But thank you for the dinner conversation that made it possible." The lobby fell silent except for the water feature and the soft hum of elevators. Harrison chuckled as he put away his tablet. "Well," he said, "that was more entertaining than most family law cases. How are you feeling?" I watched through the floor-to-ceiling windows as my family climbed into Dad's Buick, their body language tense with unresolved conflict. "Free," I said. "For the first time in my adult life, I feel completely free." That evening, I sat in my penthouse apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop, finally allowing myself to process what had happened. The adrenaline from the office confrontation had faded, leaving behind something I hadn't expected, a hollow ache in my chest that had nothing to do with regret and everything to do with grief. I was mourning the family I'd always hoped we could be, while simultaneously celebrating my freedom from the family we actually were. My phone had been mercifully quiet since they left the office. No calls, no texts, no emails demanding explanations or reversals. For the first time in months, the silence felt peaceful rather than ominous. I opened my laptop and began doing something I'd been putting off for weeks, reviewing my actual life goals. Not the goals I'd inherited from family expectations or societal pressure, but the dreams I'd pushed aside while playing the role of dutiful daughter and family ATM. The list I started typing surprised me. Take a real vacation somewhere with no cell service. Learn to paint watercolors. Buy a house with a garden where I can grow my own vegetables. Travel to Japan and study traditional architecture. Start a nonprofit focused on financial literacy for young women. Maybe, eventually, find someone who loves me for who I am, not what I can provide. I stared at that last item for a long time. When was the last time I'd been on a real date? When had I last met someone who didn't know about my money, my success, my ability to solve problems with wire transfers? The truth was uncomfortable. I'd become so focused on proving my worth through achievement and generosity that I'd forgotten how to just exist. To be valued for my thoughts, my humor, my company rather than my capacity to rescue people from their poor decisions. My meditation app chimed with a reminder I'd set months ago and never followed through on. Daily reflection, 7 p.m. I almost dismissed it, but something made me hesitate. I closed the laptop and moved to the meditation corner I'd created but rarely used, a comfortable chair facing the windows, with a view of the city lights beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. For the first time in years, I let myself sit quietly without agenda, without analyzing client needs or family crises or business strategies. Just breathing and watching the world outside my window. That's when the real emotions hit. Not anger at my family's entitlement or satisfaction at my strategic victory, but something deeper and more complex. Relief, yes, but also sadness for the little girl who'd grown up believing that love was conditional, that worthiness had to be earned through performance and financial contribution. I thought about 7-year-old Delphine, so eager to please, bringing home perfect report cards and birthday gifts bought with allowance money saved for months. When had that generosity curdled into obligation? When had love become a transaction? My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, my stomach clenched, expecting another family member borrowing someone else's phone to circumvent my silence. Instead, it was my neighbor from across the hall. "Hey, it's Marcus from 20B. I heard some commotion in the hallway earlier and wanted to check if everything was okay. I've got leftover Thai food if you want some company." Marcus Rodriguez worked as a paramedic and had the most unusual schedule of anyone I'd ever met. We'd shared exactly 3 conversations in the 2 years I'd lived here, but each one had been surprisingly easy and genuine. He was one of the few people in my life who had no idea what I did for work beyond something with computers. I stared at the text for several minutes. When was the last time someone had offered me something without wanting anything in return? When had someone last checked on my well-being just because they noticed I might need it? I texted back, "Everything's fine, but Thai food sounds amazing. Give me 10 minutes? His response was immediate. Perfect. Fair warning, my kitchen is a disaster zone, but the pad thai is exceptional. I found myself smiling as I changed from my business attire into jeans and a sweater, clothes I rarely wore anymore because they weren't professional enough for my carefully curated image. Marcus's apartment was the mirror image of mine but felt completely different. Where mine was all clean lines and expensive furniture, his was comfortable chaos. Books stacked on every surface, medical textbooks mixed with science fiction novels. Plants everywhere, thriving despite what looked like haphazard care. A guitar leaning against the couch, sheet music scattered on the coffee table. Sorry about the mess, he said, clearing space on the couch. I just got off a double shift and haven't had time to live like a civilized human being. It's perfect, I said, and meant it. When was the last time I'd been in a space that felt lived in rather than showcase ready? Over containers of Thai food, Marcus told me about his day, a car accident where everyone walked away, an elderly woman who called 911 because she was lonely, a teenager who overdosed but survived because his friends acted quickly. What about you? He asked. Good day, bad day, or one of those weird in-between days that makes you question everything? I almost gave him my standard polished response. Productive meetings, successful client call, everything on track. Instead, I found myself saying, I gave my family $2 million today, and now I think they hate me more than when I was just disappointing them. Marcus paused with his chopsticks halfway to his mouth. That's not what I was expecting you to say. It's been an unusual day. He set down his food and turned to face me fully. Do you want to talk about it, or would you prefer to hear about Mrs. Henderson's creative interpretation of chest pain symptoms? For the next hour, I found myself telling him everything. Not the strategic details or the financial implications, but the emotional truth of it. The loneliness of being valued only for what I could provide. The relief of finally setting boundaries. The grief of realizing that my family had never really seen me as a person. Marcus listened without trying to fix anything, without offering advice or judgment. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. My family disowned me when I came out as gay, he said finally. Different situation, but I recognize that particular brand of grief. It's mourning people who are still alive but were never really there for you in the first place. Something loosened in my chest. How do you get past it? You don't get past it, he said gently. You get through it. And then you build something better with people who actually see you. We sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights through his windows. For the first time in months, I felt genuinely at peace. Marcus? Yeah. Thank you for the Thai food. And for this. He smiled. Anytime, neighbor. Literally anytime. Walking back to my apartment, I realized something had shifted. The hollow ache was still there, but it felt different now. Less like loss and more like space, room for something new to grow. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. While my coffee brewed, I sat at my kitchen island and made a list, not of business goals or family obligations, but of systematic changes I needed to make to protect the peace I'd found. By 8 a.m., I was on a conference call with Harrison Blackwell and my financial advisor, Catherine Sterling. Catherine had been managing my investments for 3 years and had the rare quality of treating money as a tool rather than a scorecard. I want to restructure everything, I told them. Complete financial independence from any family access, legal protections against future claims, and a framework that makes my boundaries crystal clear. Harrison pulled up documents on his tablet. I've already drafted the trust documentation we discussed yesterday. The Delphine Montgomery Family Trust will handle any future requests with complete objectivity. No emotional manipulation, no emergency exceptions. Catherine leaned forward in her chair. What about the monthly transfers you mentioned? Have you canceled those permanently? Canceled yesterday morning, I confirmed. But I want to go further. I want a comprehensive audit of every financial connection I have with family members. Every shared account, every authorized user status, every emergency contact listing. That's smart, Harrison said, making notes. We should also consider a formal gift policy. Written criteria for any future financial assistance, if you choose to provide it. I thought about that. Actually, I want to redirect that energy entirely. Instead of reactive family assistance, I want to be proactive about causes I actually care about. Catherine smiled. Now we're talking. What kind of impact do you want to make? For the next hour, we outlined a strategy that felt more authentic than anything I'd done in years. A scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying technology. Seed money for women-owned startups. Anonymous donations to local food banks and medical assistance programs. The best part, Harrison pointed out, is that structured charitable giving provides tax benefits while creating a paper trail that demonstrates your money is committed elsewhere. Makes it much harder for anyone to claim you're hoarding wealth that should be shared with family. By noon, I had a completely new financial architecture. Trust funds, charitable commitments, and legal barriers that would protect both my assets and my sanity. It felt like building a fortress, but a beautiful one with windows that opened to let in light and air. My assistant Amelia knocked on my office door around 1 p.m. "You have a visitor," she said carefully. "Cordelia Hartwell? She says she's your sister and that it's important." I considered having security escort her out, but curiosity won. "Send her up." "And Amelia? Stay close to your phone." Cordelia appeared in my doorway 10 minutes later, looking nothing like the entitled princess from dinner 2 nights ago. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her clothes wrinkled, and she had the hollow-eyed look of someone who hadn't slept. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly. "Just us. No lawyers, no parents, no drama." I gestured to the chairs across from my desk. 5 minutes. She sat down heavily and stared at her hands for a long moment. "I've been doing math all night," she said finally. "Trying to figure out how much money you've given us over the years. And I came up with a number that made me sick to my stomach." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Del, I had no idea about the monthly payments. I swear to God, I thought Mom and Dad were just managing their retirement savings better than most people." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or strategic tears. What I saw instead was genuine shame. "The credit card debt you paid off for me," she continued, "I told myself it was just temporary. That I'd pay you back when the gallery job worked out. But I never even tried, did I? I just moved on and forgot about it." "Yes," I said simply. "You did. And Jasper's car, and Mom's surgery, and the roof repair." She shook her head. "We've been treating you like a bank that never sends bills." "Also yes." Cordelia was quiet for another moment. "The thing is, I always resented you a little bit. You were so successful, so put together, so capable. It felt like everything came easy to you. I never thought about the cost." "What cost?" "The cost of being our solution to everything. The cost of never being allowed to need help yourself. The cost of being reduced to your checking account balance." I leaned back in my chair, surprised by her insight. "So what do you want, Cordelia? An apology tour? A plan to return the money?" "I want to understand how to have a sister instead of a financial advisor," she said quietly. "If that's even possible at this point." For the first time in our conversation, I felt a flicker of hope. "What would that look like?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Maybe starting with the fact that I don't even know what kind of music you like anymore. Or whether you're dating anyone. Or what you do for fun when you're not working or solving our problems." I realized she was right. When was the last time we'd had a conversation that wasn't about money, problems, or family drama? "I like jazz," I said experimentally. "Especially Miles Davis and John Coltrane. I'm not dating anyone because I work too much and trust too little. And for fun, I'm learning to paint watercolors, though I'm terrible at it." Cordelia smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. "I didn't know any of that." "And I don't know what happened to your art," I said. "You used to paint these incredible landscapes in high school." You were applying to art schools, talking about gallery shows. What happened to that dream? Life happened. Rent and student loans and the belief that art was a luxury I couldn't afford. She paused. Though I guess if I hadn't been so focused on immediate survival, I might have noticed that my sister had become successful enough to give away millions of dollars. We sat in silence for a moment, both processing the strange conversation we were having. Cordelia, I said finally, I can't go back to being the family ATM. That version of our relationship is over permanently. Good, she said firmly. I don't want that either. I want to figure out how to be your sister without taking advantage of you. And Mom and Dad? Her expression darkened. Mom's already planning ways to spend the money. Dad's talking to 3 different lawyers about challenging the gift somehow. They're not interested in rebuilding relationships, they're interested in maintaining access. And Jasper? Jasper's confused and hurt, but he's not scheming. He genuinely doesn't understand what went wrong or how to fix it. I made a decision that surprised me. If you and Jasper want to try building something real, something based on actually knowing each other instead of financial convenience, I'm willing to try. But it starts from zero. Clean slate, new rules, and absolutely no discussion of money. Deal, she said immediately. And Del? I'm proud of you. For what you've built, for standing up to us, for all of it. I should have said that years ago. As she left my office, I felt something I hadn't expected, optimism. Maybe not all the relationships in my life were transactional. Maybe some people were actually capable of growth. It was a start. 3 days after Cordelia's visit, the real storm began. Not from my siblings, who had been surprisingly quiet, but from my parents, who had apparently spent those days consulting with legal experts and plotting their counterattack. The first salvo came in the form of a certified letter delivered to both my home and office addresses. The return address read, Whitmore and Associates, Attorneys at Law. Apparently Dad had found someone willing to take his case. I opened it in my office with Harrison on speakerphone, reading the contents aloud as I scanned the legal letterhead and formal language. Dear Ms. Montgomery, I began, we represent Theodore and Beatrice Hartwell in the matter of the unauthorized transfer of funds from your account to theirs on October 15th. Our clients maintain that this transfer was made without their knowledge or consent, and may constitute a form of financial harassment designed to create tax liability and emotional distress. Harrison's laughter crackled through the phone. Financial harassment? That's creative. What else does it say? I continued reading. Our clients are prepared to pursue all legal remedies, including but not limited to claims of intentional infliction of emotional distress, financial abuse, and fraudulent transfer. We demand that you immediately reverse this transaction and provide written assurance that no further unwanted transfers will be made. Unwanted transfers, I repeated. They're claiming that receiving $2.1 million was unwanted. It gets better, Harrison said. Keep reading. Furthermore, our clients have reason to believe that your recent actions may be the result of mental health issues or undue influence from third parties. They are prepared to seek a court-ordered mental health evaluation if necessary to protect both your interests and theirs. I set the letter down, genuinely impressed by the audacity. They're claiming I'm mentally incompetent for giving them millions of dollars. It's actually not a bad strategy, Harrison admitted. If they can prove diminished capacity, they might be able to void the gift. Except for one small problem. Which is everything we discussed about documenting your financial competence. The business records, the client testimonials, the strategic planning documents. You've got a paper trail that clearly demonstrates rational decision-making and mental competence. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Montgomery, Amelia's voice was tight with barely controlled irritation, there's a private investigator here asking questions about you. He's in the lobby talking to Claire about your work schedule and mental state. I walked to my office window and looked down. Sure enough, there was a man in an ill-fitting suit questioning my receptionist, who looked professionally polite but thoroughly annoyed. Harrison, they hired a PI. Of course they did. What's he doing? Fishing expedition, probably. trying to find evidence of erratic behavior or incompetence. I watched as Claire gestured firmly toward the exit. My staff is handling it well. Good. We need to accelerate our timeline. Can you be in my office at 3 p.m.? We're going nuclear. By the time I reached Harrison's law firm, he had assembled what looked like a war council. His paralegal had printed and organized documents into color-coded binders. His assistant had prepared a timeline of events. And Harrison himself was wearing the predatory smile that had earned him his reputation as one of Meridian City's most effective litigation attorneys. Here's what we're going to do, he said, spreading documents across the conference table. We're not just going to defend against their claims, we're going to obliterate them. He opened the first binder. Financial competence documentation, 6 years of business records showing consistent growth and strategic decision-making. Client testimonials praising your analytical skills and business acumen. Performance reviews from your corporate consulting days that describe you as exceptionally rational and strategically brilliant. The second binder was thicker. Pattern of family financial abuse, 5 years of bank records showing the monthly transfers they never acknowledged. Documentation of emergency payments for car crashes, medical bills, and credit card debt. Evidence that they've received nearly $250,000 from you over the years while contributing nothing in return. And the coup de grace, he said, opening a third binder, witness statements. Witness statements? I had my investigator reach out to some of your business contacts. Turns out, quite a few people have stories about your family's financial requests interfering with your work. Remember the Nexus Corporation dinner meeting you had to leave early because your mother called about a financial emergency? I did remember. Mom had claimed the water heater was broken and they needed $3,000 immediately. I'd excused myself from $1 million contract negotiation to send the money, only to discover later that they'd used it to book a cruise. James Richardson from Nexus gave us a detailed statement about how professional you were in rescheduling that meeting, and how he was impressed by your dedication to family despite what he called obvious manipulation. Harrison flipped to another page. 3 other clients provided similar statements. The pattern is clear. You've been consistently professional and competent while managing what any reasonable person would recognize as family financial abuse. What about the mental health angle? We're getting ahead of that too. He slid another document across the table. I've arranged for you to have a comprehensive psychological evaluation with Dr. Patricia Vance. She's one of the most respected forensic psychologists in the state. When she certifies your mental competence, their entire strategy collapses. I reviewed the timeline Harrison had prepared. It was thorough, devastating, and completely factual. More importantly, it told a story that anyone could understand. Successful daughter repeatedly exploited by entitled parents until she finally fought back. There's one more thing, Harrison said, his expression turning serious. I need to ask you directly, is there any part of their claims that has merit? Any moment of doubt about your decision-making, any influence from medications or stress that might have affected your judgment? I thought about the question carefully. No. If anything, giving them the money was the most rational thing I've done in years. I eliminated a recurring source of stress, demonstrated the absurdity of their claims, and forced them to confront their own hypocrisy. It was surgical. That's what I thought. He gathered the documents back into their binders. We'll file our response tomorrow. But first, we're sending them a little preview. He handed me a draft letter addressed to Whitmore and Associates. I read it quickly, my smile growing with each paragraph. The letter systematically dismantled every claim in their demand letter. It included a summary of the financial abuse documentation, references to the witness statements, and notice of the upcoming psychological evaluation. But the final paragraph was the masterpiece. Our client notes with interest that your clients claim to have received an unwanted gift of $2.1 million. If this is indeed the case, they are free to donate the unwanted funds to charity and provide documentation of said donation. We await their response. You're calling their bluff, I said. Exactly. If they really believe the money was unwanted harassment, they can get rid of it. But we both know they won't, because this was never about the money being unwanted, it was about wanting more. That evening, I sat in my apartment with a sense of calm I hadn't felt since this whole situation began. They had overplayed their hand dramatically, and now they would face the consequences of underestimating both my resources and my resolve. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus next door. Heard through the walls that you had a good day. Thai food celebration round 2. I smiled and texted back, absolutely. But tonight, I'm buying. For the first time in years, I was spending money on something that made me genuinely happy. And there wasn't a family member in sight to ruin it. 2 weeks later, I was sitting in Dr. Patricia Vance's office, completing what would be the final component of my psychological evaluation. The irony wasn't lost on me. My parents had demanded proof of my mental competence, and I was about to provide them with the most thorough documentation possible. Dr. Vance was a woman in her 50s with intelligent eyes and the kind of calm presence that made you want to tell her everything. Over 3 sessions, she'd administered cognitive tests, personality assessments, and conducted extensive interviews about my decision-making processes. "Well, Ms. Montgomery," she said, reviewing her notes, "I can say definitively that you demonstrate exceptional emotional intelligence, strategic thinking, and psychological resilience. Your decision to transfer the funds, while unconventional, shows sophisticated understanding of family dynamics and boundary setting." She handed me a preliminary copy of her report. "In fact, I'd argue that your actions demonstrate remarkable mental health. You identified a toxic pattern, implemented a solution that protected your well-being, and did so without causing actual harm to anyone involved." I scanned the report, noting phrases like superior cognitive function, emotionally mature response to manipulation, and demonstrates clear understanding of consequences and alternatives. "There is one thing I'm curious about," Dr. Vance continued. "How are you feeling now, emotionally speaking? It's been almost 3 weeks since you made this significant change in your family relationships." I considered the question carefully. "Lighter," I said finally. "For the first time in years, I wake up without dread about what crisis I'll need to solve or what request will be waiting in my inbox. It's like I've been holding my breath for 5 years and can finally exhale." She nodded. "That's consistent with what I'd expect from someone who successfully established healthy boundaries after a period of exploitation." My phone rang as I was leaving Dr. Vance's office. Harrison's name on the screen, and his tone was triumphant when I answered. "Delphine, you're going to love this. Whitmore and Associates just called. They're withdrawing from the case." I stopped walking, causing a minor pedestrian traffic jam on the sidewalk. "They're what?" "Withdrawing. Apparently, when they reviewed the evidence we provided, they realized they'd been sold a bill of goods by your parents. No legitimate attorney wants to argue that receiving a multi-million-dollar gift constitutes harassment." "What about my parents?" "That's the best part. Whitmore's final communication suggested that Theodore and Beatrice might want to consider sending you a thank you note instead of a legal threat." I laughed out loud, drawing stares from passers-by. "A thank you note. I'm sure that went over well." "I suspect it did not. But here's the thing, they're out of legal options. No credible attorney will take this case, and they can't afford to keep shopping for someone desperate enough to try." That evening, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months: cook dinner for myself. Not grab takeout between client calls or eat a protein bar at my desk, but actually prepare a meal and sit down to enjoy it. I was halfway through making homemade pasta when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I could see Jasper standing in the hallway, holding what looked like a bottle of wine and wearing an expression of nervous determination. I opened the door carefully. "This is unexpected." "I know. I should have called first, but I was worried you wouldn't answer." He held up the wine. "Cordelia said you guys had a good conversation, and I was hoping, maybe we could try the same thing." I studied his face. Unlike our parents' calculated manipulation or Cordelia's dramatic emotional appeals, Jasper looked genuinely uncertain. "Are you here on behalf of Mom and Dad?" "God, no. They don't even know I'm here. Actually, they're barely speaking to me since I told them I thought what they did was wrong." That caught my attention. "You told them what?" "That calling you a financial burden was cruel and stupid, especially since you've been supporting them for years. That trying to sue you for giving them millions of dollars was insane. That maybe if they'd treated you like a daughter instead of a bank account, none of this would have happened. I stepped aside to let him in. How did that go over? About as well as you'd expect. Dad accused me of being ungrateful, Mom said I was choosing sides, and they both implied that you'd somehow brainwashed me. He looked around my apartment with obvious awe. Jesus, Delaware. This place is incredible. Thanks. Want to help me finish making dinner? I have more pasta than I can eat. For the next hour, we worked together in my kitchen, and it felt like the first normal interaction I'd had with a family member in years. Jasper told me about his job at the advertising agency, his girlfriend Sarah whom I'd never met, and his plans to propose next month. The ring cost me 3 months' salary, he admitted, grating Parmesan cheese. But Sarah's worth it. She's the first person I've dated who doesn't care about our family's drama or how much money anyone has. She sounds perfect for you. She is. And Del? She wants to meet you. The real you, not the family ATM version. We sat down to eat at my dining table, which I realized hadn't been used for an actual meal in months. The pasta was better than most restaurants, and the conversation flowed easily between topics I'd forgotten we both cared about: music, books, travel dreams. Can I ask you something? Jasper said over dessert. What's it like, being as successful as you are? I mean, really. Not the family version where you exist to solve problems, but just, having built something this significant. I thought about how to answer honestly. Mostly. It's satisfying. I love the work, I love solving complex problems, I love building something that creates value. But it's also isolating, especially when people see the success before they see the person. Is that why you've stayed single? Because people are interested in your money instead of you? Partly. It's hard to trust people's motivations when you have resources they might want access to. I paused. Actually, that's been the hardest part of this whole situation with Mom and Dad. Realizing that even family members can reduce you to your bank account. Jasper was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I never thought about how it felt from your side. I just knew that when I had problems, Del would fix them. I never considered what that cost you. It cost me the ability to have problems of my own, I said simply. When you're everyone's solution, you don't get to need solutions yourself. Well, if it helps, I'd like to change that. Starting with this, is there anything you need help with? Anything I can do for you that doesn't involve money? The question was so unexpected that I almost teared up. When was the last time a family member had asked what I needed? Actually, I said, there is something. I'm thinking about taking a real vacation for the first time in years. Somewhere completely disconnected from work and family drama. But I'm terrible at planning personal travel. I always end up researching business efficiency instead of just enjoying places. Jasper grinned. Sarah is a travel agent. Well, travel consultant for high-end clients. She'd probably love to help you plan something amazing. Really? Really? And Del? She won't expect payment or favors or anything except maybe a postcard from wherever you end up. As Jasper left that evening, he hugged me goodbye, the first genuine hug I'd received from a family member in years. Thank you, he said. For dinner, for not giving up on us completely, and for showing me what it looks like to stand up for yourself. Watching him walk down the hallway, I realized something had fundamentally shifted. For the first time since this whole situation began, I felt hopeful about the possibility of having actual family relationships built on mutual respect instead of financial obligation. It wasn't the family I'd started with, but it might be the family I could choose to keep. 6 months later, I was sitting on a beach in Santorini, watching the sunset paint the Mediterranean in shades of gold and crimson. Sarah had been right about disconnecting completely, 3 weeks without checking emails, without solving crises, without being anyone's solution to anything. The trip had been everything I'd hoped for and more. I'd learned to paint watercolors from a local artist named Dimitri, spent hours wandering through ancient ruins with nothing but a camera and my thoughts, and discovered that I actually enjoyed my own company when it wasn't constantly interrupted by other people's emergencies. My phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "How's paradise? The building hasn't burned down without you here to manage everyone's problems." I smiled and typed back, "Paradise is exactly as advertised. I think I'm becoming one of those people who post sunset photos." "Good. You've earned the right to be insufferably relaxed." The transformation hadn't happened overnight. The first month after the legal threats collapsed had been strange, almost disorienting. Without the constant background noise of family drama and financial requests, I'd had to rediscover who I was when I wasn't in crisis management mode. I'd started therapy with Dr. Vance, not because anyone questioned my mental health anymore, but because I wanted to understand how I'd allowed myself to become trapped in those patterns for so long. The sessions had been illuminating, helping me recognize the difference between healthy generosity and enabling manipulation. The Montgomery Tech Solutions Scholarship Fund had launched 3 months ago, providing full college support for first-generation students studying technology. The first recipient was a brilliant young woman named Elena Rodriguez, whose story reminded me of my own journey, minus the family complications. Watching her excitement at receiving the scholarship had felt better than any family validation I'd ever received. Cordelia and I had been meeting for coffee every few weeks, slowly building a relationship based on actually knowing each other. She'd enrolled in art classes and was working on a portfolio for gallery submissions. Last month, she'd shown me a landscape painting that took my breath away. The talent had always been there, just buried under years of practical concerns and financial anxiety. "I never thanked you properly," she'd said during our last coffee date. "Not just for the financial independence, but for showing me it was possible to choose yourself. I've been so focused on survival that I forgot about actually living." Jasper's proposal to Sarah had been everything he'd hoped for, and their engagement party had been the first family event I'd attended in months. The interesting thing was how different it felt when money wasn't part of the equation. We'd talked about their wedding plans, their career goals, their dreams of traveling through South America, normal conversations between siblings who were genuinely interested in each other's lives. Sarah had become an unexpected ally, someone who understood the dynamics without being trapped by them. She'd helped plan this Greece trip with the enthusiasm of someone who genuinely wanted me to have an amazing experience, not because she expected anything in return, but because that's what caring people do for each other. My parents were a different story entirely. After their legal strategy failed spectacularly, they'd gone through what Harrison described as the 5 stages of failed manipulation. Denial had lasted about a week, followed by anger that burned through most of November. Bargaining had been particularly creative. They'd sent cards, flowers, even a fruit basket with a note suggesting we put this unpleasantness behind us. Depression had set in around Christmas when they realized their traditional holiday gift expectations weren't going to be met. I'd sent thoughtful but modest presents and received radio silence in return. The final stage, acceptance, was still a work in progress. Last week, I'd received an email from Mom. Not a demand or a guilt trip, but a simple message. "I saw the article about your scholarship fund in the Meridian City Tribune. I'm proud of what you've accomplished, even if I haven't always shown it well. I hope you're happy." It wasn't an apology, exactly, but it was acknowledgement. For now, that felt like enough. My phone rang, interrupting my meditation on family dynamics. Cordelia's name on the screen. "How's Greece?" she asked without preamble. "And please tell me you're not checking work emails." "Greece is perfect, and I haven't opened my work email in 4 days." Personal record. "Excellent. I have news, I got into the gallery show." I sat up straighter on my beach chair. "Cordelia, that's incredible. Which gallery?" "The Meridian Contemporary Arts Center. It's a group show for emerging artists, but still, actual wall space in an actual gallery where actual people might buy my work. I'm so proud of you. When is the opening?" "Next month." "And Del?" "I want you there. Not as the family member who might buy something to be supportive, but as my sister who I hope will be proud of what I've created." The distinction mattered, and we both knew it. "I'll be there." "And Cordelia?" I'm already proud of you. After we hung up, I walked down to the water's edge, letting the waves wash over my feet. The Mediterranean was warmer than I'd expected, and the beach was nearly empty in the early evening light. I thought about the email I'd received from a potential client yesterday, a major corporation wanting to hire Montgomery Tech Solutions for a year-long project that would essentially double my annual revenue. 6 months ago, I would have cut my vacation short to take the meeting. Now, I'd politely asked them to schedule something for after I returned, and the world hadn't ended. My phone buzzed with one more message, this one from an unknown number. Ms. Montgomery, this is Elena Rodriguez from the scholarship program. I just wanted you to know I got accepted to MIT early admission. Thank you for making this possible. I promise to pay it forward someday. I stood there on the beach, reading Elena's message 3 times, feeling something I'd never quite experienced before. Not the satisfaction of solving someone else's problem or the relief of meeting someone else's expectations, but genuine joy at enabling someone else's dreams without any expectation of return. The sunset was reaching its peak now, the sky ablaze with colors that no photograph could capture. I took out my phone and snapped a picture anyway, then sent it to Marcus with a message, insufferably relaxed, as promised. His response came back immediately, perfect. The world needs more insufferably relaxed successful women. Don't come back until you've achieved peak relaxation. As I walked back toward my hotel, I realized that the girl who'd sat at that family dinner 6 months ago, absorbing insults and writing checks, was gone. In her place was someone I was still getting to know, a woman who could be generous without being taken advantage of, successful without being isolated, loving without being used. I'd thought this story was about revenge, about teaching my family a lesson they'd never forget. But it turned out to be something much more valuable. It was about learning the difference between being loved for who you are and being valued for what you provide. And for the first time in my adult life, I was building relationships based entirely on the former. The financial burden had finally learned to stop carrying other people's weight. And it felt exactly like freedom. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.